Hi, I'm Indenal, and number 24 on my list of fun things to do on a Saturday is to infiltrate the local sperm bank and temporarily take ownership of as many pots of semen as I can. Then it's time to hit the streets to offer as many free samples of my man-made vegan savoury yogurts to willing members of the public. Fun family activities aside, in this video I'll be giving my opinion on how best to use the specialist Emma Sundance Rosier in Battlefield 2042. From what she's best suited to, and as I'm clearly not sexist, there will be no talk of sandwiches, cleaning and the avoidance of parallel parking to loadouts and tips on how to get the best result out of playing with her, consensually of course. So if you enjoy intros that involve the encouragement of consuming semen under false pretenses, are completely void of sexism as this intro clearly has been, and also teaches that playing with people should always be done consensually like 48% of the time, please do consider subscribing, and if you're already subscribed, I want to be inside you. Anyway, Sundance. Let's start with a quick overview. Sundance's specialist gadget is the Smart Explosives, consisting of 3 types of grenade. They are the Scatter Grenade, which when thrown disperse into several smaller grenades, the Anti-Armor Grenades, which will lock onto enemy vehicles and chase them down like that strange man at the park chases pigeons and children, and the EMP Grenade, which will fry anything electrical such as player equipment, vehicles and my sex doll, which sucks because now it's like fucking a corpse and that's no fun. That's why I got the sex doll in the first place. Sundance's passive trait is the Wingsuit Operator, and this is what really gets me pretty damp in my groin region. The trait is pretty self-explanatory really. It allows you to deploy a wingsuit to traverse the Battlefield 2042 maps quickly and in most cases without being seen. Next, let's take a look at how best to use her skills. There are 2 ways in which I think Sundance performs at her best, and as this is the 21st century, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't slap a label on the 2 ways. So way number 1 we'll call the Penetrator, and way number 2 we'll call the V Penetrator, with the V clearly standing for vehicle and not vagina. This is an educational video, so please do get your brain out of the gutter. The Penetrator's role is to infiltrate the enemy's rear without their prior consent and fuck that shit up like a big YouTuber's attempt at an apology for jerking off in a suicide forest. In normal terms, the Penetrator's job is to get deep into enemy territory and pull off some impressive flanks, thinning the ranks to allow their own team to progress. These rear-end violations, or flanks as those with a lesser warped outlook would refer to it as, are made infinitely easier with the use of the wingsuit, which will allow you to get balls deep into the enemy's anus, I mean sector, and get to work on decimating the opposing team. I'll get into a bit more detail on the ideal loadout for this role a little later on. The V Penetrator's role is similar in a sense to the Penetrator's role, as both make best use of the wingsuit to access otherwise inaccessible or difficult to access areas of the map. But unlike the Penetrator, the V Penetrator specialises in destroying enemy vehicles. What separates the 2 is the loadouts, but like I say, I'll get to that in a minute, so please do get off my case. I have a lot going on right now. I've just started getting my period, which as a man is quite concerning. My dog now identifies as a cat, which is taking some getting used to, and I've just learnt that steak cooked in pig fat isn't vegan, so yeah. Tough times. So put simply, the V Penetrator utilises the wingsuit to get close to vehicles, and then with the assistance of the anti-armor grenades and the V Penetrator loadout, which I'll probably get to at some point, blows them up. I was going to talk tips next, which come to think of it must be every homosexual Jew's idea of conversational heaven, foreskin and butt stuff. But I think I'll do loadouts first instead, which I could have just done instead of commentating my own thoughts and actions, but whatever. Subscribe for more ill thought out video structures just like this. So first, let's talk about the Penetrator loadout. The Penetrator's goal is all about the flank. Get deep into the enemy territory and take them from behind. Take them out from behind. With this in mind, I'd go with a suppressed SMG, but any suppressed weapon will work, suppressed pistol of course, the insertion beacon as your gadget, and either smokes or the proc sensors for your grenades. The suppressed weapons are an absolute must to avoid detection when firing. When firing unsuppressed, you'll appear on your enemy's minimap and said enemies will be on and or inside you in a matter of seconds, or approximately the same amount of time it takes an overly proud parent to bring their child up in any conversation. Yes, we get it, Jess. Dale is getting great grades at school, but I'm currently getting circumcised. I like to use the insertion beacon in one of two ways. The first way is to leave it somewhere high, like the top of a crane or a container carrier, and then each time I spawn, use that as a base point to wingsuit wherever I want on the map. Or the second way is to drop it once I've wingsuited behind enemy lines. Try and leave it in a safe spot if you're able to. Something to note with the beacon, like a condom or the excuse that you just slipped, sneezed and sharted in just the right proportions and that's how your clothes fell off and you accidentally committed adultery, it's only good for one use. So each time you spawn on it, you'll need to replace it. If you don't spawn on it, I think it stays. Not overly sure to be honest, think that's how it's been for me anyway. For the grenades, when you're flanking, you either want to obscure the enemy's view or know where the enemy is. Which you go with is up to you. I tend to go with the proc sensors most of the time as I need to know where everyone close to me is at all times. Kinda like an abusive relationship, but the smokes do definitely have their uses. For the V penetrator, I'd likely again go with the suppressed weapon but choose something with a bit of range, so an assault rifle or marksman rifle. C5 for the gadget or the anti-air launcher if you're going for air vehicles, which was a dumb statement, and again the proc sensors or smokes for your grenades. A weapon with a little extra range will likely be of more use due to the fact that when destroying vehicles you may end up in more open areas of the map where your engagements will be more mid to long range. C5 as it's the only thing that destroys vehicles quicker than women drivers. That was a joke, I'm not sexist, so let me try that again. It's the only thing that destroys vehicles quicker than non-male drivers. That's better. Now I could be referring to any one of the 473 other genders. There we go, not sexist at all. I'm in denial 1, anti-sexism police 0. Of course you could also go with the recoilless M5, but as this is a ranged weapon and the whole point of Sundance is to get within molesting distance, I'm going with the C5. Go with the anti-air launcher if you're after enemy aircraft, and the best way I find to take out enemy aircraft with Sundance is to throw an anti-armor grenade to force them to deploy their flares, then switch to your launcher, lock on and fire. And to steal and modify a famous movie quote, 69% of the time, this tactic works every time. For the grenades, similarly to the penetrator, it comes down to preference. However, though I still stick to proc sensors for the most part, there may be a stronger argument to using smokes to provide soft cover whilst you close the gap on your target. Something to note about these two roles, like a male transitioning to female, it's much easier for the V penetrator to also play as the penetrator. You just lop the cock off and drill a hole. Well, that's how I've been doing it in my medical practice for my patients. I mean, when I say medical practice, what I really mean is a shed with extensive soundproofing and grade 1 locks, and I suppose when I say patients, I mean people coming to collect the PS5 I'm selling. But who has time for semantics? Anyway, yeah, the V penetrator is effectively the penetrator with added explosives instead of the beacon, meaning the V penetrator can do all that the penetrator can, minus the convenience that comes with creating your own spawn points. Of course the standard penetrator can also take out vehicles with the anti-armor grenades, but with the addition of an explosive based gadget, it is infinitely easier. Wow, I don't think the word penetrator has been used so much since Sesame Street's educational 4-part miniseries on how to fist a hand puppet. This definitely exists, however top men have been concealing its location for the past 2 decades. Top men. Next, let's talk tips, and I'm not referring to girth, veins per square centimetre and smegma. Oh no, I'm talking tips and tricks. So first up is getting high. Not like that though, unless you want to of course, it can only help probably. All of the maps of Battlefield 2042 contain some form of verticality, some more than others, so like the opportunity to jump in front of a blind person in a queue, you should take advantage of this. You may want to make sure that they are actually blind first. This is best done by throwing a tin of whatever's nearest to you at them, and if it hits them square in the face, you should be good to go. I'm in denial, life pro tip number 57. Of course there's the obvious high spots on top of buildings, container carriers, bridges, etc. But you should also make the most of spawning on air vehicles and the weather effects. Spawning on aircraft is an easy way to get to a height that will enable you to deploy your wingsuit and get behind enemy lines. You may want to avoid piloting an aircraft if your intention is to bail, as your passengers may resent becoming unwilling participants in 9/11 2042 edition. If however this is your only option, be a compassionate Battlefield 2042 player and give your fellow comrades enough height to take the wheel or stick and gain control of the aircraft. You see, I'm not just an arsehole who creates morally questionable content, I'm an arsehole who creates morally questionable content and tips on how to be a compassionate Battlefield player. Heart emoji. As for the weather effects, in other words the tornadoes, be sure to take full advantage of the tornado's ability to suck like a Taiwanese hooker and ride that storm till you're able to knock on Jesus' door to preach to him the work of Satan. Once you've left a leaflet, deploy your wingsuit and make your play. It's a bit tricky to plan the whole getting sucked off by a tornado thing as the weather effects are random, but when the opportunity strikes, be there. And on the subject of getting high, note that you don't actually have to get that high to deploy your wingsuit. I think the minimum height you can deploy is around cargo container height. For a successful deployment at this height, you'll need it to be a harsh drop. It won't work if the drop is gradual like that of a hill. Next is undeploying. You can cancel your wingsuit at any point during flight to change direction and also to land if you're within close proximity of the ground. Do be careful when landing though, as if you're coming in too hot and you undeploy, you'll end up with your tits around your ankles and you'll be sat in a puddle of your own blood and urine, which sounds like a hell of a Friday night, but when it comes to landing from your wingsuit, it means bad times. You seem to be more damage resistant when you land without undeploying, so if you need to land at speed, you may be better off landing without undeploying. Next, let's talk insertion beacons. I know I covered the beacon briefly earlier in the loadouts, but the beacon and Sundance are such a great combination, I thought I'd say a bit more about it. With the maps of Battlefield 2042 being as big as Dwayne Johnson's left tit, Sundance with her wingsuit really does offer unrivaled mobility versus any of the other specialists. However, gaining the height you need to traverse these large expanses of the map can be a bit of a cock in a meat grinder. So to avoid pulverizing your penis each time you spawn, I believe the spawn beacon is the answer. Just gain the height you need once, for instance the top of a building, and then drop your beacon. Then each time you respawn, you're able to depression near a banker and just jump off the building. Of course you'll need to deploy your wingsuit to avoid full depression near a banker, but yeah. This is how I primarily use Sundance, switching over to the V-Penetrator style whenever I feel like I'm getting non-consensually groomed by a priest. The priest being a vehicle. Next tip, use the smart explosives. You've 3 types of smart explosives that replenish over time, so be sure to use them abundantly. The scatter grenades are best thrown low and short. This will cause a tighter dispersion of smaller grenades which are much more likely to actually cause damage and even kill your intended target. When thrown long and high, the dispersion, like a 10-year-old in a Call of Duty lobby's racial slur vocabulary, is broad, which means your target may only get hit by one of the smaller cluster grenades which will cause little damage on its own, so keep it tight. The anti-armor grenades are great aircraft repellents. Throw one at an incoming helicopter and they'll be out of there like a turd on skis. Wow, what an image. They're also great at forcing an aircraft to deploy their flares, leaving them open for an anti-air launcher attack. You can destroy vehicles with the anti-armor grenades, but this tends to be the case more so when the vehicle is already partly damaged. And finally, the EMP grenades, possibly my least used of the lot but still useful nonetheless. They're most useful used against enemy equipment rather than players and vehicles, for instance Rangers, drones with C5 all over them and Boris's turret. However, should you find yourself about to be gang raped by the enemy team, dropping an EMP may disrupt their minimap enough to allow you to escape. Unless of course gang rape is your thing, in which case stand out in the open and fire a couple of I'm here and willing to be violated rounds off. So I think gang rape is probably a good point to end this video, so yeah, that's Sundance. How to use her consensually and a few tips for good measure. So if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, let me know any tips you have on Sundance and subscribe for more questionable content just like this.